Well, let's get started with this conversation with someone better known as Mama Dawn. This is Dawn Nickel, co-founder of She Recovers with her daughter, Taryn Strong. She's going to share about the impetus for She Recovers. We're going to go deep into her story of addiction and recovery. We're also going to dive into all of the different retreats that they hold with She Recovers, creating these amazing in real life connections, as well as online connections. And we're going to touch on the coach designation program as well. So here we go with Mama Dawn.
Here, we want to show you what's possible in the world of sobriety. We introduce you to the various tools, programs, and resources available, because there are way more options than you may even realize. We want you to find the one that works for you.
And we do it through people. People who share their pathway to recovery and will help you find your path to freedom. Because getting sober can feel hard enough. You don't have to do it alone. I'm Sarah Roberts.
And I'm Roger DeVoe, and this is Sobriety Starts Here.
Dawn Nickel, this is going to be an awesome conversation. I know you as Mama Dawn, as so many of us, refer to you. You're an amazing powerhouse pioneer in the recovery space, and I can't wait to dig into your story. But first, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, and I have such respect for the work that you do and the community building that you're doing. So this is really awesome. I appreciate your time.
Oh, you're the best. And I was saying, you were early on this call. I'm like, damn, this lady is a workaholic. We'll get into that.
Oh my God. So much. Yeah.
I know. So
but this is the fun part, right? This is the fun part. The connection is the fun part. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. And that's like me. And that's really what we're going to dig into. So you are the co-founder with your daughter, Taryn Strong, of She Recovers. I want you to share with people watching, what is She Recovers and who did you create it for?
Well, She Recovers, we describe ourselves as an international movement of women who are in or seeking recovery from substance use disorders, mental illness or health challenges like depression and anxiety, trauma, codependency, grief, all the things. I know we say that we're all recovering from something. And who did I? Well, I developed it and created it for myself initially. So back in 2011, I hit the wall with workaholism, which was my then current manifestation of my addictive tendencies. I had been in recovery already by that time, for over 20 years, recovering from substance use disorder. But I'd kind of taken up work as my new drug and hit the wall with that. And just took some time off of work and started creating this presence and practice for myself where I would blog every day and write and do self-reflection. And I started really reflecting on the idea that, I knew I had to go back to this job, which was in research, and it was a big, director job. And it was a great job. But the whole time I was off, I kept thinking, I don't want to go back there. I want to talk to women in recovery, which is what I was doing on my blog, right? I was starting to make these connections with women online about recovery, not just my recovery from substance use disorder. In fact, I wasn't even telling anybody I was in recovery from substance use disorder. When I first started blogging, I was just focusing on the workaholism. There's not a lot of stigma attached to workaholism. There's a little more with substance use. Mm-hmm. And so at the back of my mind, I thought, I really just want to do something with women in recovery. And I've been mentoring and, been participating in communities of women in recovery since 1987 when I first went to treatment and started this journey. And so that's what I thought. And anyway, when I went back to work after 4 months, I realized that I needed to not blog every day because I was trying not to be a workaholic. And so I switched over to Facebook and I created the page as a way of just continuing the conversation that had started with my blog. And again, I felt like I had something to say. People were teaching me a lot by responding back to me, this through your own blog work. And I just wanted to keep the conversation and the connection going. So I created it for me, thinking it would just be my way of continuing in the space. And then it just kind of went from there.
Oh, did it ever go from there? It's absolutely incredible. You have, 250,000, close to 500,000, I think, followers. It's
270,000 on Facebook. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? 270,000 women who are
92% women. Mm-hmm. We have men that follow us as well. You don't really ever see them on there. They don't comment much once in a while. And, they're always respectful. I think in the last almost 7 years since we've had the Facebook, I think I've kicked off 3 men, for being inappropriate. So that's not bad.
Oh, that's not bad at all. So there's the Facebook page where people can go and they can connect with you and with Taryn, and then with other people that are in recovery, like you say, from cancer, from workaholism, from substance use disorder, whatever the case may be. They can really connect and share with one another. And then you also, which is what I think is so incredible about your work, you create in real life connections. You and Taryn run retreats under the She Recovers brand, and you have these amazing retreats. So I'd love for you to share with people what the experience of those retreats is like.
Sure, I'd love to. So we part of our kind of mission statement is that we create welcoming spaces and transformative opportunities on and offline for women to connect and support and empower each other. So we started off online, and, you know, within a very short period of time with the Facebook group, which started in June 2011, by January, we had, you know, thousands of people following us. And then I got laid off from the job that I had gone back to. And so I had an opportunity to look at my life and decided that we wanted to do something, some fun project, and decided that a retreat in Tulum in November 2012 might be fun. So we did that. We held our first She Recovers retreat in Tulum in November 2012. Which
is in Mexico, for anyone who doesn't know.
Oh, yes, on the Caribbean side, so the Mayan Riviera, the turquoise water and the white sand. And it was just remarkable. You know, we had 18 guests join us. There was myself, Taryn, and our Mexico retreat partner, Sharon Lee, who's a dear friend who's originally from Victoria, now living down in the Mayan Riviera. And yeah, the 18 women just loved it. And by the end of the retreat, I mean, 9 of them had signed up to come back the next year. And we hadn't actually even determined we were holding another retreat yet.
I feel like this is a symbol in your life where people just basically force you to
So anyway, the retreats turned out to be a thing, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But in May 5th, which is my 58th birthday, we will launch our 20th retreat. So it's our 20th She Recovers retreat. Most of them have been in Mexico. We've done 6 or 7 here on the West Coast in a beautiful island called Salt Spring Island. We've done 1 in California, and we did 3 in Bali last year. And I think what's special about our Sacred Pause retreats which is what we call them, kind of the series, is that they really are intended as a sacred pause. And we're so busy. I mean, even those of us who are not flaming workaholics like I am, like, when do we ever really get time to just kind of settle into our bodies and into our breath? Have naps, read books, eat really healthy food, gourmet style, of course. And so that's what our retreats are about. We don't fill them up with a lot of programming. We have yoga in the morning and the afternoon with Taryn. We have 3 meals a day. We have sharing circles in the evening. And the rest of the schedule is really whatever you want to do. And what we end up finding is that women just really embrace. At first, they're like, "What do you mean there's no classes, or there's no workshops, or there's no other programming?" And, you know, some of them are quite antsy, but they settle into it and end up really just connecting back with their breath, with their bodies, with themselves, and of course with each other. It's an amazing thing. So that's kind of the formula that has worked really well for us. We have some exciting plans we won't be sharing for a while, but to move into another retreat space, which will be actually having retreats where there's more programming, like classes and workshops and learning, because we realize that we're not kind of offering, our offerings aren't for everybody. Some people really just don't want to go and relax, and that's okay too. Maybe they find relaxation elsewhere in their life, and when they go on a retreat or also on a week-long, whatever we're calling it, that they actually want to be learning and developing something. So
I think that's fascinating. Yeah, and I think that's fascinating that you really take the feedback from the people that come to your retreats, and it's not about changing and morphing who you are. It's offering things that fit for this individual, and also offering things that fit for this individual. And then you also have retreats that you do, like gala events, like you did last year in New York City, which I was a part of and absolutely loved being with you. And you're doing it again in LA. And those ones are a bit more, there is some programming there. There are speakers.
So they're like our annual conferences. We did She Recovers in NYC last May, and thank you for participating. You did a workshop for us. It was just so well attended and received.
Thank you.
And then She Recovers in LA is coming up this September, and it'll be, you know, it'll be similar to what we did in New York City. We have a few different twists on things. We also do 1-day workshops now. We are doing them kind of across the country. We're heading to Atlanta for one on April 28th on our way to Mexico. And they're kind of they're a mixture. I guess they're kind of a mixture of a sacred pause retreat and a conference, because we have a couple of speakers at them. So we have a little bit of content. We have a lovely, nutritious, healthy lunch. We do a yoga class with Taryn, and then we just build in time, a long lunch, like it's usually like an hour and a half to 2 hours, just so that women can connect and get to know one another. Very often, you know, in San Francisco, we had 80 women come. And basically, there were a lot of women in the Bay Area who didn't know that there were other women who were kind of seekers like themselves, looking for this type of community. So in part, our one-day workshops are intended to kind of create local community, She Recovers communities, and we're working on kind of what exactly that looks like. But right now, we have a coaching program, and so our coaches are able to launch workshops and sharing circles in communities. And we just really want to, again, it's always this interplay between cyber recovery and the connections that we all have made in cyberspace that are so meaningful and so real. I mean, there's nothing unreal about them, but there's just the secret sauce for me, and I think so many women, from what I hear, is you can make these relationships online and carry on as close friends for months or years, but when you actually get in each other's company and can give each other a hug and just experience each other's presence, it just takes it to a whole other level. And then you can kind of go back behind the screen, but you've created this new, deeper understanding and friendship and relationship. So again, for us, it's just always about this interplay of online and in real life. And again, for us, She Recovers, and I say this all the time, it's never been about creating She Recovers like that everything is, it's like there's a She Recovers this and a She Recovers that. She Recovers has always been and always will be Mama Dawn. Maybe that's part of it, like an umbrella over all the beautiful work, healing work, important, connecting, supporting, empowering work that all of you, everybody else, everyone is doing in the space, right? So I like kind of being a clearinghouse. People ask how our Facebook page got so large, and it's always because we share. I think we share probably more broadly than a lot. I mean, we share a lot. We share more content is shared, like other people's. What I'm trying to say is not that I share more than you or anybody else, but most of our content is sharing other people's work and other people's things. So I think that that's what's kind of created the movement towards She Recovers, is that there's a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of stuff, and it feels like a place where we trust, like there's a lot of trust that's ingrained and inherently built into what you've created. And I think that that's just something that's palpable through cyberspace. And then of course, with the in real life connections that you create. It's funny because I'll ask you this question later on, asking about your favorite tools in recovery. And 9 times out of 10, people will list in theirs that in real life or online connection, no matter what connection, somehow connecting with other people in recovery is a huge piece towards their peace and recovery. And it's just huge. And so what I love about what you do is that you're really creating, like I said, these opportunities for this to happen, because it's so hard for us to try to figure out how to make a gathering come together. But when you've got these beautiful retreats that we can just go, the Sacred Pause retreats or the gala events, these annual big, elaborate, beautiful events in either New York or LA or other big cities, or these one-day workshops that people can attend. Like you say, there's nothing like being in the company of someone else who gets you. And I think it's great that people can meet online first and then connect in real life. I think it really breaks the ice, and it allows us to kind of know who we're going to gel with. And I just love it. I think it's fabulous.
Yeah. And I mean, we're lucky. The reason that we're able to do this is because, as part of She Recovers, we have Peyton and Dara, who you will have met through New York. So, we have members of our team, and they're event producers. That's what they've been doing. So, I mean, they came to us as volunteers in New York City. They're still with us and helping kind of move this machine called She Recovers forward in a way that eventually, we'd all like to make a living at it. But for now, we're just doing we're just setting the stage and setting the groundwork and getting things going. And we couldn't do any of what we do without them. So I really wanted to mention them. I'm
so glad you did. They're both absolute dreams. Peyton lives in my city here in Ottawa.
I know.
I'm so lucky. I've actually had opportunities to spend in real life time with her. And then of course I met Dara in person in New York. They're both just absolute dreams. They're awesome. I would like, before we start moving into your story, which I really want to get diving into, I would like to touch on the She Recovers certificate coaching designation. Sorry, whatever the words are. You tell me. I want you to share what that is.
Sure, the She Recovers Coach designation program.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Took me a while to get it too, trust me. So when I was on my leave in 2011 and I decided I really want to do something with women, and I was, I had a PhD. I'd been in school for 13 years. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want any more degrees. And I don't think my partner wanted me to go get any more degrees. So I thought, well, what can I do? I have all this experience as a woman in recovery. And I talked to some people and they said, well, you should become a recovery coach. And I said, oh, what is that? Never heard of it. And I did some research and I found that there was a recovery coach training that was available at that time. It was the only one that was available that had kind of a stringent, a fulsome kind of program. And I decided that I would take that and become a recovery coach, and that somehow that would translate into me doing this work with women in recovery, that I didn't have any idea what that was going to look like. The problem was I couldn't take it because I was going back to work, and I knew I couldn't, just like I couldn't blog at night. I had to stop blogging and I switched over to Facebook. I knew that I couldn't be a student and also go back to work. So I put it at the back of my head. When I'd been back to work for several months, I got laid off. The downturn in the economy meant that government was really kind of looking to cut back, and they cut back an entire division in our ministry, and I was at the pinnacle of it, and I got a year severance. They said, go sit, figure out what you want to do. I started my coach training, and I completed my recovery coach training through this other school. It took 2 years, part-time, and we'd started the retreats and things were moving along. And I decided that, I actually didn't want to do one-on-one coaching. I didn't, I went back to my consulting job, which was, I work in the area of mental health addictions and intimate partner violence. So I was very happy doing that work. It was at my own pace. It paid really well. But I had this coaching, and I was kind of using the coaching in part as we were starting up different elements of She Recovers. Well, 5 years in, I guess it was, because it was a year ago, November. Oh, and then after a period of time, other people would find out that I had a coaching designation and ask me, where they could get one. For reasons I won't get into, I wasn't comfortable promoting the company that I had done the training through. It was a great company in many ways. It was just one little thing that just meant I, had to hold back by giving them my seal of approval because of an experience that I had. So I started looking around for another training school, and I found the International Association for Professional Recovery Coach Training, which is led by a wonderful woman named Dr. Jean LaCour. And I started referring people to them. And in particular, I referred my sister, Deborah, who you may have met in New York. She's 13 or 14 years clean. I should know, but something like that. She took the training, loved it. I got to see the training through her eyes and access the content. And I just thought it was great. So I started, I've referred people to them over the years, other women who want to kind of take on this new career. And about a year ago, November, I was talking to Jean. She called me to tell me about some changes they'd made to their program. She wanted me to know because she knew that I referred people and they'd improved it. And there were some pretty cool things happening with it. And somehow, and this happens to me often, out of my mouth came these words that, oh my goodness. One day I'd love to do a She Recovers Coach designation program. Maybe we could partner with you to do the life coaching and the recovery coaching, and then we could just add on the She Recovers piece. And, so within 4 months we launched. We launched it in February, 3 months before New York City. I'm crazy. And I look back at these things that happen and I think, no wonder I'm tired. We launched it in February, a year ago, February. Yeah. We've had 70 women sign up for the training. 20 have graduated, have gone all the way through. Another 5 are this close. Some of them are just waiting for feedback on their final modules. And they've launched their own recovery coach practices, or they're doing workshops, or they're taking their training and they're taking it into their current careers. And yeah, it's just really remarkable. And for She Recovers, what it is for us, it's our way of scaling our program. So when we're going to end up doing, right now our retreats sell out a year in advance. We launched our 2018 retreats in November. There's no spots left in 2018 for our retreats. Mm-hmm. So we need to at least double that for 2019. Eventually, we're going to have lots of retreats, lots of workshops. We have an online program that we're starting called She Recovers Life. And our coaches will be, an integral part of our growth. The coaching itself there's life coach training, and then there is professional recovery coach training. And then the She Recovers Coach designation, that's 100 hours. And then the 10-hour She Recovers piece is really just, you can see this, it's just it's a module that has 10 units. One covers each of our 10 intentions and guiding principles. And that's what it's about, right? Everything that we do is about these intentions and guiding principles. It's really, really simple. everything that whether it's a Facebook post or a big event in Los Angeles, everything has to kind of fall within our guidelines. And that's how we know we're doing what we need to be doing. So that's the coaching program. And like I said, it's been remarkable. I think, women have just shared information about their own personal growth from some women have taken it and been like me, kind of ended up going, well, I don't know necessarily that I want to coach right now, but I'm really enjoying the learning and the development and kind of the growth that I've experienced through taking it and learning so much more about themselves and their own recovery.
That's amazing. So
yeah,
can you just take the She Recovers designation, or does that have to be tacked on to the other life coaching program?
Yeah, currently if you are already a certified professional recovery coach, so you've already done life coach training and recovery coach training, then you can just take this. What we're looking at now is we are going to be expanding our entry points to other people who say they have a lot of addiction counseling. They've got that experience. So they've got the recovery piece, but they don't have life coaching. And life coaching is very different than counseling. So if they don't have the life coaching, they'd have to take the life coaching component and the She Recovers component, and then they'd have to qualify. I mean, there's an application process where we have to be convinced that they've got everything we kind of need in the recovery thing. The other thing we're going to do is, because we're all recovering from something, so we're not just looking for people in the substance use disorder space. We're looking for people who have, again, life coach training, some significant training in whatever it is, grief support, nutrition, eating disorder, like all
workaholism,
all of the different things. So we're looking at that. Our problem right now is just capacity, because we have to kind of develop the application process so that we can vet more people. The pilot, which has been what we've called it since we launched. I'm a big fan of pilots because it means you can take what you're learning and perfect it before you call it the real thing. And just what we're really learning is that, the pilot has worked really well we have the people who are taking the IAPRC training primarily with, the life coaching and the recovery. It's easy and it's clean for us. But again, we're getting to the point where, we've got a lot of recovery coaches now who are working with women who have substance use disorders, including alcohol and opioid and any other drug. And now it is time to kind of go beyond a little bit and start opening up a little bit, because we have to stay true to our principles, right? And the first one is we are all recovering from something. So, we don't need 500 coaches who can deal with you if you have an alcohol problem, and none if you've got a problem with grief or codependency or love addiction or sex addiction or any of the, other process addictions. So it's just all part of the growth.
Yeah, and if you're watching right now, most people that we believe that come to this site are going to be people that are newly sober. Just imagine the possibilities in your life. If you can grab onto what Dawn is talking about and gain some time in recovery, you can actually take your mess and turn it into your message by becoming a recovery coach, no matter what it is that you're recovering from. So I think it's absolutely brilliant what you're doing. How can people find out more? Is the best place to go sherecovers.co?
It is, yeah. Our website's it's got a link to the program. The more in-depth program information about the coaching program is on the IAPRC site, because the registration, everything goes through them. But yeah, you can start on She Recovers. The information about Los Angeles is on there. Anybody who's a vendor or is in the LA area, or even if they aren't, if they want to be a marketplace vendor or an exhibitor at LA, there's a sponsorship page on our website. We've got some free resources on there, including, you know what? I need to put your podcast up there. I haven't done that yet. Can you send me the logo?
Will do for sure.
We've got different podcasts on there. We've got a reading room, it's just a room, full of all the links where you can find out more about books for women in recovery, all sorts of books.
It really is fabulous. It really is a starting point for a lot of people. And again, especially women who can feel really comfortable going to a place where everything there is going to be something that's going to lead them down a path wherever they want to be led. If they want to be learning about what books people are reading in recovery, or if they want to be thinking about doing a retreat or taking coaching or following Taryn with her yoga. I love it that it's almost like that. It's like you say, it's that umbrella, Mama Dawn at the top. Which
we also have a blog, and we have a blogger, Erin W. She's just like a beautiful blogger. She just every week.
Her words are amazing.
Yeah, pretty cool.
They're amazing. And then people can hook into the Facebook page from sherecovers.co, or should they go to Facebook and search She Recovers?
Either or, yeah, you can link to it from the website. It'll take, there's a little Facebook icon there. And then we also have one other option for people if they're looking for like a secret online community. We have She Recovers Together, which is a Facebook group. It's secret, so nobody knows you're in it. They don't know if you're posting in it or anybody else is posting in it. You can't even find it. You shouldn't be able to find it when you search.
Nope.
And there's, anybody who's interested in joining that, the best way to do that is just to go to She Recovers and post and say that they would like to be added to the group, and then we can kind of connect with them and add them that way. It's
Brilliant.
Probably the easiest instruction. But we have about, there's a number of groups out there. I know that you're administrating a beautiful one as well. And yeah, it's just, as you know, there's just a lot of support and growth and connection taking places in these online groups.
And that's it. I mean, the more the merrier. It's about really just having, just extending opportunities for people to be able to share and to feel that they are not alone. And that is the only mission that I've ever had when I've started out with any of this work that I've been doing, that it's just been about trying to find how I am not alone, and knowing that I'm connected to you and to Dawn and to Taryn and to others that are in this space, like just being connected to other people. Yeah. There's such power in that.
It's so cool. I feel like we're all colleagues who just, we can't walk down the hall to speak with each other, but you're always at the other end of whatever we need, or, we're all there for each other, and learning and growing and sharing. Like, that's the most important thing to me about this space, is that we share what we're doing and what you're doing. It's one of our other principles is it's about collaboration, not competition. And we mean that with every fiber of our being.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's just so, there's nothing like being able to connect with people who understand, who have been there, who aren't going to shame us, who aren't going to ridicule us or look down on us. I mean, it's just, there's nothing like being connected to people who have been there, who get it.
Exactly. And I think, one of the reasons that the people like you and I who are doing this work is because we do get that. And I think because we're so open to everything that's going on for people, right? I mean, She Recovers, there's no, we don't have, it's not like an abstinence-based platform where unless you're completely abstinent, you should stay off of our page. Like, there's nothing like that. It's, it's just, everybody is where they're at on their journey, and we meet you where you're at and find out how you need to be supported. And what I think is so amazing about meeting people where they're at is when you're supported, if you're at a place that isn't a healthy place for you, and you get support and connection, and you feel empowered by what you're seeing other women doing, you do move to the next stage, because you want to be there. Like, you just want to keep going. So if anybody out there, and I'm sure there are people who are brand new to this thing called recovery, whether you're struggling with, a relationship, that relationship, the one that just, no matter how bad it is, like, you're sticking it through, and because he or she's going to change because you're going to change them. Or if it's, your nightly bottle of wine that you're realizing is too much, or whatever it is, just know that just by hanging out online with some of the people like Sarah and others who are doing the work and who are providing the opportunity for you to connect, your life will be transformed. Just, what's the one thing that you can do today? Maybe today the one thing you could do was listen to this interview and, read Sobriety starts right now with you here. I mean, I love that. I love your branding. I think it's so cool.
Thank you.
Trying to read underneath it. Yeah.
Navigating your path to freedom, I think. Navigate your path to freedom. That's it.
Yeah. And it's your path, right? I mean, that's so key for us. Again, like another principle, but we have to be supported to find and follow our individualized pathways and patchworks of recovery. It's like, what works for me is not going to work for you.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of what works for you, let's dive into your story, going all the way back to your childhood. I think that people really like knowing how people were raised, and it allows us a chance, again, to just connect a little bit deeper, to say, oh, that's kind of how I was raised, or that's different than me, but I see similarities there, whatever the case may be. Yeah. If we can dive into your story, starting from childhood and then working our way all the way up, I think that'll be a really awesome chance for people to connect more deeply with you.
Okay. I'm really old, so I don't remember.
We're not buying that. Oh, speaking of which, we're definitely not buying that. Your hair color is your natural hair color. We literally just uncovered this at the beginning of our chat before we hit record. Who has beautiful blonde hair at whatever age you are.
57. Yeah, I know. I'm lucky. So the trick is that there is gray in there. It's really well kind of camouflaged by the.
It's so camouflaged. Your hair,
Thank you.
I think everyone who meets you assumes you color your hair. And we are here right now. We are laying it down. Dawn Nickel does not buy hair dye.
Never. I haven't had dye in my hair for 25 years.
Oh, that is
even
amazing.
then it was just highlights, I think. But yeah, no, you know what? Some things just work out that way for us.
I love it.
Childhood. So my childhood, you know, I had a mom and a dad and 2 older brothers and a younger sister. And we lived in Montreal. I was raised in Montreal, and we had a beautiful home and a pool, and things were good. I think the only thing that was really missing in my childhood was emotional kind of connection with other members of my family. And that is the direct result of the trauma that my mom experienced in her childhood, right? So, I mean, trauma carries on. And so she wasn't able really to connect at an emotional level as we were children. That changed particularly when I got into recovery. It changed very much so towards the end of her life when, you know, it was just no holds barred. We were, you know, we had become very, very close before she passed away. I guess when I look back at my childhood, I think about my addictive tendencies were to read voraciously, like Nancy Drew was. I mean, I was just obsessed with Nancy Drew and the Bobbsey twins for a period of time.
Oh, me too.
And then it kind of, you know, I got really obsessive about television shows like The Partridge Family and The Brady Bunch, and some after school specials like Dawn, the story of an alcoholic or something, you know, just these different things. And then I started my kind of addictive tendencies turned towards fantasy, where I was just always playing out this movie in my head, you know, and I'd go in the bathroom and I'd, you know, be speaking into the mirror like I was speaking to some other. It's kind of weird. But yeah, I was just always in fantasy, you know, that I would choose different movie stars and tell myself in my story that I would be pretending and acting out in my room or in the bathroom or wherever that was my mom and that was my dad. And it was Dean Martin I chose Dean Martin as my dad for a period of time, but I don't know why. People probably don't even know who Dean Martin is.
He was handsome, wasn't he? I
was. Yeah. And he looked like my uncle, and I don't know. I really liked my uncle. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. I'm sure my therapist, if I'd ever shared that with him, had a party. But yeah, and I just kind of did my own thing, and I was very, very smart in school, and so that's kind of where I got a lot of attention. I didn't get a lot of attention at home, so school kind of became my identity. And
like teachers praising you and being
I developed some close relationships with some teachers, and then we moved, and like everything just got upside down. We moved to Ontario. My dad traveled with his job, so I was 12 years old, and I had this identity as being the smart kid, and I had this tendency to kind of dramatize my life in my head. And we moved, and when we moved to Ontario, I don't know if they still do this, but there wasn't enough kind of due diligence around like how smart is this kid that's coming into grade 8 in a new province, and where does this person fit in. And I think Ontario thought they were smarter than Quebec at the time or something. So but every class had kind of like your high achievers, your middle people, and then the people who needed a little bit of support. And I think they were just lazy because they wouldn't have had to ask very many people which one I should be in, which was hello. And they put me in the middle one. And so then I just remember thinking like, no, like, what are you doing to me here? This is in retrospect, right? I mean, my whole identity was I was smart. Yeah. You know, I didn't have a lot of other things going on, but I was really smart. And then all of a sudden I wasn't even that anymore. And I think that kind of started my downfall.
Wow.
A few years later, we moved again, only further west. We moved to Edmonton, Alberta. And by that time, in Ontario, actually got to live out my life. My mom put me in acting classes, and I started acting, and I was really good at that. So that was cool because I wasn't smart anymore, but I was a very good actress. I did a couple of professional plays. I was a founding member of the Brampton Youth Theatre.
Wow.
And was just kind of like, okay, now I'm just going to be an Academy, I'm not going to be smart. That's okay. I'm done. I'm going to be an Academy Award winning actress. And then when I was 15, they moved to Edmonton, and I was like, okay, I'm not smart. Got nowhere to act here.
Wow.
Might as well go smoke pot with those boys over there or something. I mean, again, it's kind of, it's just kind of not really having an identity and then losing a couple of identities. And
it's kind of very much like all or nothing thinking. Like if I'm not the smartest, I'm therefore dumb. Exactly. And I'm not just going to act in this play. I'm going to become an Academy Award winning actor.
It's like, that's how my brain works, even still a lot sometimes. But at the same time, my parents were having marital difficulties. They actually separated, and they got back together. And when my mom passed away some years ago, they were still together. But there was just a lot of chaos in our family, emotional chaos. And I just kind of disappeared. Like I had been disappearing into the bathroom in my room, in my little Hollywood stories. I just kind of disappeared into hanging out with the kids who were doing dope. And by the time I was 16, I quit school. I left. I ran away to the Yukon. And I stayed there for 10 years.
Wow. And
so,
did your
I
parents
quit
know?
school.
Did your parents know what was going on when you were really? I mean, they obviously were having issues in their own marriage, but did they see what was going on with you?
No.
No.
And when they didn't. Again, this is 1976. They
Yeah.
didn't. I mean, they didn't
Different
know
time.
what to do. They didn't know what to do, and they had just different experiences. My mom's life experience was her dad was in World War II, and they got to a place where she had to quit school to support her family. And so if I was quitting school to go and run away to the Yukon, whatever, no big deal. She'll get there. My mom was fine. She turned out okay. Donald turned out okay too. But I was so ill-equipped. I mean, I had no resources whatsoever. So when I got to the Yukon, I wasn't just hanging out with the boys in the corner in the school ground smoking pot. I was hanging out with the 20-year-olds who were doing cocaine and the 24-year-olds who were dealing cocaine. And I just got swept up into the life, and it was pretty insane. And luckily short-lived, right? I mean, from 16 to 20, it was like, I got into 4 overdoses.
What were you overdosing on? What was your drug of choice?
Well, the overdoses were usually pills. Like I liked to do a lot of different drugs and then have to come down with a lot of different pills and alcohol, like to bring me down. Cocaine was my drug of choice. And so, yeah, I would end up just taking too many pills, trying to sleep. Well, ended up almost nearly sleeping permanently. So I was I was a mess. I was a mess. And my parents were back in Edmonton, and, they'd come and scoop me up every once in a while and bring me home, and I'd get on a plane and go back. And it was 4 years of very, very condensed, dangerous living. And then,
where were you living in the Yukon? Like with roommates or with drug dealers?
Generally with roommates. Boyfriends. I started, I think I lived with my first boyfriend when I was 17, and they were almost always drug dealers because I didn't want to pay for drugs. I guess partly. But yeah, and then when I was 20, then I was in a relationship from the time I was 19. When I was 19 for a year, and I got pregnant when I was 20, and that was kind of that. I would say that was the beginning of the end of my addiction, or certainly the end of my using. It took me 7 years before I got into treatment, but from the time I got pregnant with my oldest daughter, Ashley, who's older than Taryn, who you've spoken with, it was just a process of, okay, now I'm going to get my life together. Like, I don't want to overdose. I don't, I just feel icky. I wanted to go back to school, so I did my GED when I was pregnant.
And were you excited about this pregnancy?
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was like everything I'd ever wanted and didn't even know it, right? It was, and also I was obsessed with the person who got me pregnant. Like there was like a real serious love addiction at that time. And I knew that this was the answer to the relationship. And, we were off and on again until Ashley turned 2. And then it was like really done. And that was actually the beginning of my final kind of bottom, was that, after we broke up finally, and it just kind of, again, from the time I was pregnant till the time I was 27 and went into treatment, my life was a series of binges. I would go months without using, and then like have a weekend from hell, and then go months without using again.
And did you ever have a moment during that period of time? Did you ever have times where you said to yourself in the quiet moments, like, this is a problem. I have a problem here?
I said that when I was 17 years old, the first time I overdosed and was in the hospital. And then I would. The one thing about me and that those years that were so crazy and hanging out with older people was that there were just a few really good people in my life who were older than me, and they saw my vulnerability. And, as much as I was trying to be tough, because I also dealt drugs and, was part of that scene. And, but they were just kind of like almost like mamas to me. And one in particular, Mickey, they just kind of helped me kind of sort myself out. They, enabled me in some ways, but, yeah, I was just kind of lucky that I was cared for. But they would even say things to me like, maybe you should not be doing these drugs, or maybe you should, and they were outgrowing it, like the people around me were having like their party days, and then they were like, now I had a baby, or now they had bought a house, and they weren't doing it anymore. So I had a very condensed kind of like crazy period of time. But from the time I was 17, I knew that I don't do well with substances, and I would do better not to do them. But I wasn't really surrounded by, like women out there now find, right? Like if the culture doesn't support you to make choices about not using, then it's pretty hard to not use.
Yeah. And also you've got a young baby at the, now you're 27, you've got their, whatever.
Two by then, right? So so we had Ashley and then Taryn, and again,
with
was
the same father, same.
No. Ashley's dad and I were done by the time she was 2. And then I don't know how many years, a couple of years later, I met Taryns Dad and we got married. And yeah, we were doing some drug dealing for a number of years. And then so what happened was Taryns Dad ended up in the hospital. He was a cocaine addict and he ended up in drug-induced psychosis. And, we were living down on the West Coast by then. We had a beautiful home on the water, on the Sunshine Coast. Like we were living the life, kind of like the Miami Vice life. It was pretty ridiculous.
Like, is most of your income coming from drug dealing at that point?
Oh, for most of those years, absolutely, for sure.
Wow.
At that time it was.
Mm-hmm.
But then he ended up in the hospital, and that was kind of the end of the drug dealing thing for him, because the people we were dealing the drugs for didn't want the people who were losing their minds dealing the drugs anymore.
Okay.
So, and I mean, this is all serious stuff. I don't mean to make light of it, but right now it's like so many years ago, like it's a little bit crazy to me that I'm sitting here where I am today talking about that time when we were.
And I get that. And I think that whenever I have the opportunity to have these kind of conversations, that's kind of the way it feels, where it's like it was this old version of me that doesn't fit anymore in any way, but it's interesting to point to and to look at and to learn about, just again, to not to be voyeurs, but to really see ourselves in these stories and to say, oh my gosh, like there, but the grace of God go I, or I was there too, or my stories, worse or whatever. I think it's always really interesting. So, okay, so you've got 2 kids at home, your husband overdoses, he decides to quit. What do you decide to do?
Oh, no, he did not decide to quit.
Oh.
I decided he was going to quit.
Oh.
So we went to before they would release him from St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver, we had to see a drug counselor, and we spoke with her, and she asked him what his plans were about the cocaine. And he said, well, I'm never going to do cocaine again. That was, it's pretty crazy. It's a pretty good indication. I better not do cocaine anymore. She said, well, I think that you shouldn't smoke pot or drink or anything. And he said, yeah, well, that's not going to happen. I'm going to drink and I'm going to smoke pot, but I'm not going to do cocaine. So we kind of went home, and I was like, I don't know. Like, I think I've been trying to quit everything for so many years myself that I thought, here's this great opportunity. So he was going to have none of it, but I continued to see the counselor for 6 months, because I wanted to figure out how to get him to quit. And I was more or less quitting. I'd more or less quit myself. But about 6 months into those meetings, I just remember her stopping me kind of at the beginning of one of our sessions and saying, whoa. I don't want to hear about Patrick today. She said, Dawn, I do not even remember what Patrick looks like. And you've been coming in here, whatever it was, every 2 weeks, to tell me what Patrick's up to. I would really like to switch gears now and start focusing on your drug problem. And I was like, I don't have a drug problem. I mean, I haven't binged since 3 weeks ago or something. And, and then she started kind of just talking to me about what would your life look like if you didn't have those periods of, binge and die, and those types of things. So anyway, I made what everybody thinks they can do. I said, listen, if you really think that I should stop completely, I will. I promise you. And then she made me sign something that said, an agreement that said, if I binged again, that I would go to treatment. And I really made a connection with this woman. She was very supportive, other than kind of telling me off every once in a while. And so I did. I binged again. Like 2 weeks later, I was in her office, and ended up actually I told her that I would go to treatment. And then I decided I wasn't going to go to treatment, but it gets convoluted. But in that relationship, there was also violence, and it was usually drug-induced violence. And so after the drugs were gone, I thought there would be no more violence. And as it turned out, there was still one threat of violence. He didn't get violent, but when you've been hit in a relationship, a threat is just as scary as an actual kick or punch or whatever it was. So there's just one moment where he threatened me, and I was scared, and I just, something about what she had been saying to me, and I just thinking like, it's all balled up in one, this horrible, unhealthy relationship. this need to really take care of my children who were, starting to recognize that, mom is sick sometimes. And I don't quite understand that. My daughter, Ashley, had told me that I made her sick one day because I was particularly like hungover and burnt out. Anyway, it all kind of came together and I ended up in treatment. And during that 28 days, it was suggested that I give my husband the ultimatum that I either went home to a substance-free home or that I wasn't going home. So I called him and I basically laid down that ultimatum, and he just basically said, "So where are you moving?"
Oh, okay.
So, and you know what? Honestly, at this point, like I was ready. I'd already moved. I'd already moved on emotionally, sometime before. So.
And was he was the one that you were sort of addicted to?
No. That was Ashley, my older daughters.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
that was years. Yeah.
Okay.
No, this was after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this felt like something that you could leave.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I did. And I did leave. And I left and I, took the two girls and I moved to Victoria, where I am now actually, but I didn't stay here for very long. But yeah, I moved here and I have not drank or done cocaine since I left treatment in 1987. For the first 2 years, I smoked a lot of pot, like a lot of pot. And I ended up going back to treatment at the end of 2 years to get off the pot. Because I got crazy on it. Like it was insane.
Did you go to the same inpatient treatment for pot as you did?
No, I didn't. I went to a 28-day program originally, and then I went to another program for a week, an inpatient 7-day program for the marijuana.
And it's just making me pause for a moment to think of where you were at in your life. You have 2 young daughters, you're on your own, you've left a marriage, but you know that you need to expand your treatment, situation. You needed to go back to treatment, and you didn't let all of those life things hold you back from doing that. And I think that is something that happens a lot, where we think, we can't possibly go to treatment. How could we possibly, I interviewed Lisa Smith, where she was like, I'm a lawyer. I need 5 days to get this thing under control. And I love that she did it that way, but, but didn't let all of that other stuff stop her from doing what she knew she needed to do in that moment. Yeah. And you took that 28 days because you knew you needed it, and you went and you did it. And then when you knew you needed it again, you went and you did it. And life was crazy, and you didn't have a lot of support where you were necessarily. Your family didn't, live nearby, from what I'm understanding.
No, they didn't. No.
And yet you just knew that this is what you needed to do to save your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing.
And it's what I still do now, right? There are times when I need to do something to save my life, and I carve out the time and figure out how to get it done because I'm worth it. I'm worth it. And, that was the beginning of my kind of journey towards worthiness. And the rest, the short version of the rest of the story is that I did get involved in a 12-step program for drug addicts. And it was where I found my tribe, my women, my friends, people who were doing things with their life. They were going back to school, starting businesses, raising families, working on their spirituality, working on their health. And it was everything I needed for many, many years until it wasn't anymore. And I still attend meetings, mostly when I'm in Mexico. When we're in Mexico, we go to a couple of meetings a week because it's just very much a part of the culture in the town that we spend several months in every year. At home, I don't go as often. I'd like to, but my husband goes more often than I do. He's also in recovery. My current husband, new husband, great husband. We've been married for 26 years. He's got 29 years of recovery.
And this is obviously who Taryn considers her dad. Oh, and I only say that because she mentioned when I interviewed her that her parents were in AA NA meetings, 12-step meetings from when she was 4 years old. So this is the dad she's referring to.
Yeah. That's the guy. Yeah, for sure. I mean, she still also has a dad, and her dad, who was kind of a bad dude, relatively straightened out. He's fine. He's an okay guy. There's, I would never marry him again in a million years, or even if I went back and had the choice to do it again, I wouldn't. But he was a good dad. He was a good ex-husband. In the end, he kind of smartened up and got his act together.
And think about all of the lessons that you learned with him along the way, right? Those wouldn't have been there had that relationship not come into your life when it did. Yeah. So no regrets anywhere. So, okay, so where are we in your story? So now when did you go to school? Because I know you mentioned getting a PhD. When did all of that happen?
Well, when Ashley, so at the time when I was a single mom with just Ashley and her dad and I, he was my kind of love addiction.
Right.
We were on again, off again. He was in university. I went back to university for a year when Ashley was a baby. I got my GED when I was pregnant, and I loved it. But then he and I broke up. And when we broke up, it was like my emotional bottom. I still look at it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I took the money for my student loans that September and bought a bunch of dope and decided I would go back to Whitehorse and I would make a lot of money, and then I would have a lot of money for the school year. It doesn't really work like that when you have a drug problem. So I went up there, I did all the drugs, and I couldn't come back and I couldn't go to school. So I had this year, and again, it was kind of like, for me, like when I look back, it was that reconnection to that like 12-year-old kid who went from being the smartest kid in school to like, you're just in the middle. Like, you don't have that now, that we're taking that away from you.
You're
I
not
went back into university. And although I couldn't write, I couldn't speak, you know, I'd been so messed up. I was not articulate in writing or in speaking at all. It didn't take very long for my brain to start coming back. And I learned how to study and, you know, overstudy and all the things you do when you go back to school. But within that year, I was reminded that I was smart. And by that time, I didn't need that as I wasn't seeking an identity of being the smart person, but it gave me confidence to know I could do this. I could become a counselor. I could do whatever I think I want to do. Anyway, and then, you know, like I said, the drug deal kind of thing went sideways, and I didn't get back to school till many years later. So when I'm in recovery, 87, and then by 90, I quit smoking pot in 1989. By 91, 92, I'm back. I'm engaged to Alan, my current husband. We're in Alberta living, and I got laid off from a great job. I'd become a paralegal through those years. Like from the time I was 17, I worked as a paralegal and also a bartender. I usually had 2 or 3 jobs going at the time. And I decided somehow I worked for the Alberta government. And after a couple of years, I had an opportunity to take a buyout. It was Ralph Klein. I'm just thinking of the names, like the premier. There was a big downturn in the economy and they were offering kind of packages. And I was the first one at HR saying, "Oh, pick me." And I took the money and I went back to school thinking I would just finish that degree that I had started, which was a women's studies degree. And I finished the women's studies degree, and then I did a history degree, and then I did a PhD in healthcare policy. And so I went back to school in recovery for 13 years and graduated, was getting set to defend my PhD dissertation in May 2005. I was turning 45, and with about a week before, 10 days before I was set to defend my dissertation, I ended up in emergency surgery where it was discovered that I had colon cancer, and the tumor had perforated my colon, and I was septic, and I was within an hour of my death.
Ugh.
So that was, and my husband had already driven over here to Victoria with our everything that we owned. And we were moving to Victoria. So there I was in the hospital, you know, kind of like nearly dead. And all my stuff was in Victoria, and I had a dissertation to defend in a week. And it was a pretty crazy time. But as I like to say, I was on pretty serious painkillers because they had removed an organ from my body, most of it. They left just a little bit. And I made the decision to go ahead and defend my PhD dissertation, and I did so in the hospital. I did it in the Dean of Medicine's private boardroom at the University of Alberta, 1 week from surgery.
Ugh.
And, you know, I remember we just kind of were playing around with the levels of the pain pills, and there wasn't pills, it was IV drugs, so that I would know like when I could go in and defend and how long I could talk for before I had to go out and get more. It's very weird. But I defended my PhD dissertation successfully.
Congratulations.
That's
the kind of commitment.
I know. It was crazy, right? And I laughed. Like the person who was on my committee, he's actually the chair from Duke University, one of the departments in Duke University. And he said to me after he said, "Well, obviously, you know, you did have kind of the sympathy factor coming in." He said, "But despite that," he said, "you nailed it." So that was good.
Why was it so important for you to defend that PhD?
Honestly, it was just practical because I was in Alberta and I wanted to get to Victoria. This was where our life was. I mean, at that time, I knew that I had like a 30% chance of surviving living because of the stage of cancer that I'd had. Because after the surgery, before I defended, I would have my husband wheel me down to the health library in the hospital. It's a teaching hospital. And I was looking up like everything about my tumor and like what it was.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get out here because I wanted to experience what I consider to be paradise here on the West Coast. And I just wanted it. And so it was important to me that I not reschedule. We didn't tell anybody on my committee the week before that I was in the hospital, because we knew that they would want to reschedule, or somebody would make me reschedule. And it had taken 6 months to line up all these people on my committee. I just wanted it done. I wanted to move on.
Yep.
And also at the time, I thought that I was going to do a postdoc at Johns Hopkins University. And so I wanted to get it done so I could make sure that that application went through. As it turned out, within a very short period of time of moving to the coast, I decided that I didn't give a
Go ahead.
I didn't give a shit
Yep.
about my academic career. That I was never going to leave my family and go live somewhere else to be a postdoc. I was, life was too short and I wasn't going anywhere. So.
And is that what cancer taught you?
Yeah, that taught me a lot, but that's sure what it taught me. It taught me a lot. It didn't teach me as much as it needed to, because within 6 short years, I was at the bottom of a workaholic kind of bottom, right? So
share that if you can. So now you're cancer. So at that point then, so you have the surgery, and do you go through chemotherapy?
Yeah. As soon as we figured out that because I'm Canadian, you can move from province to province. And as soon as we figured out I could move to BC nonetheless and start chemo, I came here and I did chemo for a year. I was teaching at the university. I started, doing some consulting work. Started working, but I was doing chemo for the year. So I wasn't like working like a workaholic. I was just working like a normal person, full time, but not crazy. And then that just kind of, I guess by that time, I think, again, you only learn these things in retrospect, but in retrospect, what I realize is I felt like I'd been an addict for this period of my time. And then I'd been in school for 13 years, and then I'd had cancer, and I was so behind. And I just really, financially we were behind. My husband had sold his business when we moved, and, I was making really good money. Those initials just kind of really increased the amount of money I could make. And so I was consulting, teaching, and I also got headhunted into a position that I eventually got laid off of in government. So I had these 3 careers going, was making money. I was getting that, I think I'd been in kind of denial about nearly dying, and I was kind of just getting all these kind of external confirmations that I was okay, and I was succeeding in my careers, and I was, excelling as a teacher, and, again, just kind of reverted to letting the outside world tell me I was okay and I was doing okay. Mm-hmm. until that day where I wasn't okay anymore. Mm-hmm. And that kind of brings us back to the beginning, which is where I ended up, in blackouts from working too much, having anxiety and panic attacks, getting sick all the time, losing things. I mean, I was just a disaster, and recognized that I needed to do something. I needed to do something differently. Wow. And so went on a leave for 4 months and started blogging. And that really does take us full circle, kind of.
I love it. You mentioned that when you were in the hospital, that they were giving you IV drugs. Was there ever any concern at that point that you'd become addicted to opioids?
Here's the thing that happened for me is that I had a real serious pill problem, but it wasn't painkillers so much. It was, it was muscle relaxants and downers and things. But when I first was in recovery, I've had 3 separate sets of surgeries since I was in recovery. The first one was I broke my tailbone, and I'd broken it falling off a bar stool when I was 18. Ouch. I was sober. But the second time I broke it was in recovery, and it needed to be removed. So they removed my coccygectomy, it's called. Most painful thing you could ever imagine, and then some. And because I was new in recovery and I had all these people in my recovery circle, 12-step recovery circle, talking to me about stuff, they're like, you can't take painkillers. And I'm like, you know what? I can't take pain. So I'm taking painkillers. Now, if you want me to talk to the doctor and tell him that I'm an addict and he has to be careful, I'll do all that, but I'm taking painkillers. And I had this discussion before. I'm taking painkillers. Yeah. My pain threshold is like not very high. So with that experience, what happened was I did tell my surgeon that, that I had a tendency towards addiction, and that I would like non-addictive drugs or not too many of real drugs. Well, he wouldn't give me anything, as it turned out. And I was passing out from the pain. Like I would literally scream, pass out. They'd bring me back to, I'd scream and pass out again. And they wouldn't give me anything because I had told them I was a drug addict. Until my husband, also in recovery, practically grabbed the doctor by the throat and said, you just give her something and you give it to her now. So What I learned from that is that, you got to be careful with how you share information.
Yeah.
And so the next time, like many years later, I had a hysterectomy, and I didn't tell my doctor that, I had a problem. What I did was I told the people around, like, I don't know what's going to happen with this. I'm going to take these drugs, and like, is it going to fire up something? And I know that for many people it does. It just didn't for me. I mean, the thing about addiction, like, we're not all addicted, we're different, we're at different places along the spectrum, but I'd rewired my brain. Like, getting high was no longer what turned me on. So I took the pain pills as recommended during the hysterectomy, and then
to treat pain. And when they are taken to treat pain, they treat the pain, and they don't get you high. They they can affect us, but they treat that pain, and they can be really necessary when we're going through something really extremely painful.
And you feel fuzzy. Like, don't get me wrong, you feel fuzzy. And don't get me wrong, there are people for whom are being overprescribed pain pills that are getting addicted.
Yeah.
But by this time, I had like 15, 20 years in recovery, and I knew what I was looking for, and I knew what I was watching for, and I knew the feelings I was, So,
and people are taking pain medication when they are not in pain, just to get the high. I think that's what I was trying to make the point of, that you were in pain, needing painkillers to attack that pain. And otherwise people are taking opioids that aren't in physical pain. So it affects them differently, of course.
Yeah, well, I think that, but I mean, the truth is that people are taking them for pain, and they become addicted. Too, right? It's just, I think it's about your own tolerance for the drug. It's your mindset. Your mindset is so important. I just think that we're all different.
Yeah.
For me, I was lucky enough to have been filled with so many years of recovery and not wanting to, like, I don't ever like to be out of control anymore. Like, mentally, I can't do it. So it's not comforting to me to take a painkiller that makes me feel weird. So by the time I had, but again, like in the hospital, when they took out my colon, I was like, probably like even worse than the coccexectomy. It was just like excruciating pain. Bring it on. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to lie there and take this pain when something can take it away. When I got out, and I, over the years, I have some nerve damage from the chemotherapy that's never gone away. And I about once or twice a year now, it used to be 6 or 7 times a year, I get cluster headaches that I never had before the surgery. And I have to take a narcotic for it. But it's been so long now that actually, like, I had this small small bottle. They're all expired. They're so old. I don't even have anything right now. If I had one of my attacks and there's nothing else that can take it away, I'd be screwed, because I don't have anything to take for it. So I should probably go to my doctor and get like 2 or 3 to carry around with me, especially when I'm out of the country or something. But yeah, by the time I got out, and also because you never really know. So I do build in, like, I have a partner who's in recovery. He's going to notice if I'm messing up with my pill.
And I think that's a really good point to make, that I think that for each and every one of us, when we're along our path of recovery, we know there's that point. I know AA talks about, like, not in these words, but what you can and cannot fuck with. Like, I think we know what we can and cannot mess around with. And I think that in your case, it was just a simple matter of, this is the decision I'm making because I know this is right for me, and I'm not trying to pretend away anything. I've been in recovery for 20 some odd years. I don't want to go back to that place. I need this for pain, and that's what I'm doing this for. So I think that is a really important point to make, and I like that you made it.
Thank you. Yeah, and it doesn't make me any better or different than anybody else. I mean, if I think, for me, it's just what's right. If I was depressed or anxious and in pain, and I took something that started changing how I was feeling and thinking, I could just as easily end up addicted again as the next person. I just haven't been in those circumstances where I just think there's this perfect storm for people sometimes, right? So my thing is just, I don't judge anybody. I mean, like, take everything and anything that works for you in your recovery. If you're doing medically assisted treatment, go for it. Any of those things. Like, I just don't judge anybody else's path. And I think it's between them, their physician, their sponsor, if they have one, if that's the route they're going. But I'm like, I'm never going to say, when I'm in excruciating pain from surgery, I'm not going to pass on the painkillers. Not going to happen. I'm not a martyr.
Yeah, I totally respect that approach. And I understand that that's not the approach that other people take. And like you say, all different pathways and whatever works. So how did workaholism, I mean, obviously we can tell from this conversation that you always pushed yourself, and you always worked hard and achieved things, doing your PhD, defending your thesis in the hospital bed. So when did you start to recognize that workaholism was an addiction for you, or something that you needed to address?
Oh yeah, it was definitely because of my bottom. Like when I started blogging about the parallels between workaholism and substance use addiction, and seeing, like that I had been blacking out, that I had been hiding my work, just like I hid drugs,
Wow.
that I was lying to people about what I was doing when I was working. He's not listening, but I think I remember saying that I was going to a movie one night with some friends, and I went back to the office and worked for 3 hours. Weird. Mm-hmm. So it was just, everything was, my health was suffering. My kids were saying, every time we asked you to do something with you, and they'd moved here, like my 2 girls had moved here, and they're like, why did we even move here? We asked you to do something and you're always working. So just kind of things were deteriorating all around me. And I knew, that, well, this is just kind of the same as what it used to be, only it's financially the opposite, instead of draining my bank account, I'm filling it up. Mm-hmm. And, I just recognized, for me, there's so much, as so much of this involves the brain and our brain chemistry. And it was just adrenaline seeking. There's just nothing like getting through a 14-hour day and knowing you nailed this, that, and the other, and you're good. It's just, now I'm done that. No, 20 more emails. Yay. No more. Ding, ding. So I think
how do you manage it? Sorry. So you think that what?
I just think that addiction is addiction. It's like the pleasures, whatever we use to light up those pleasure centers in our brain.
Yes.
Is what we go after.
Mm-hmm. So how do you manage it now when you feel yourself being drawn towards, because I feel like it's somewhat different than an addiction to a substance, because the substances we can just say, no alcohol, no cocaine, no pot, no pills. But when it comes to workaholism, how do we manage? Because we live in a society, in a world that tells us that, to achieve and to acquire and to keep going and to push is the way to do things. How do you manage that? And when is it healthy striving versus perfectionism, workaholism? I think we all
know what I think for me, I know. So think about the gray area. There are gray areas. I know what my gray areas are. I'm living in a gray area right now. I'm living in, just because there's a lot going on and I'm working more hours a day than I want to. So I know when I'm kind of I'm very aware now. Doesn't mean that I don't do it. Doesn't mean that I don't get into kind of, so hard to describe. Doesn't mean that I don't overwork. I do overwork at periods of time. And what right now is one of those periods of time. I've got 10 and 12-hour days quite often. But I try to do things like on Mondays, we have our granddaughter. I went and played with the goats at Beacon Hill Park. And then we went to the park for 3 hours. I go to bed early. I just have to, it's the only way I can shut down. If I'm sitting up, I want my computer in front of me. Yeah. So I go to bed. I get away from my drug, which is my computer. Mm-hmm. For me, it's very much about, the difference for me is when I am overworking, I'll call it overworking, and I'm enjoying it, then that's dangerous. When I'm like, oh yeah, this is good. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do that. For me lately, it's just been okay, this is a very busy time. I've got to get this, that, and the other done. And then I'm looking forward to this day when I'm not going to do. So it's it's how I feel about it. It's almost like if I'm getting off on it, it's problematic. Mm-hmm. If I'm recognizing that, I'm actually not loving this busyness, I'm doing too much, then I'm still kind of in a good zone, I think. Mm-hmm. And for me, what I've got to look forward to is, I have this week, it's busy, but tomorrow I don't have any calls. I love a day with no calls. I try to keep one day a week where I don't have to engage if I don't want to. I mean, I'll still work, but I don't have to be on or just talking with people. Next week, it'll be busy. And then I leave. We've got a big potential partnership meeting on the East Coast on the 24th to the 26th. Then we go to Atlanta for one of our workshops there on Saturday, the 28th. And then the 29th, we go to Mexico. And I'm in Mexico for 3 weeks. The first 6 days is just to get ready for the 2 retreats that we're doing back to back. The 2 retreats back to back, I'm in my element on that beach at this villa that we go to, that we've been going to. And everything gets reset. My rest gets reset. And I sleep. I sleep really well. That's how I keep going, I'm very particular about getting lots of sleep. But yeah, my diet will be reset. My naps, I'll have naps, and I'll be simply connecting with other women for 2 weeks, like 14 days of just getting to know some new women who are newer to our community, reconnecting with so many of the women who come on our retreats, our returning guests, and it will fill me up. And I'll be, you know, I'll probably come back and work too much for a couple of weeks because that's how I do it. But so I don't ever, once I decided that I wasn't going to achieve daily balance in my life, and figured out how to create balance in other ways, then I think that was really my healing path, was as long as I'm for sure going to take some time.
Yeah.
Then
It
I'm
really
okay.
feels like you take the pressure off by doing it that way, by setting up your life that way, where it's, like you said, not trying to gain daily balance. I do find that very challenging in my own life too, where people talk about balance all the time. And it's like, some days, I mean, there's just no balance to be had. I mean, I'm running from one thing to the next. That's not balance. And I know that, or I have to, you know, I have to if I want to get a workout in, I got to get up at 4:30 in the morning. Well, then I better go to bed early enough to get up at. So I think there are some days where just balance is not the goal, but you know, overall, I think
overall balance.
Yeah. And like the recharge, that's the key.
I think so. It certainly does seem to be working for me. And like I said, my indicator is always like, are you getting off on this? Like, is this making you feel important, or is this making you feel tired? You know? And when I'm feeling tired, it's a good sign.
Yeah.
Basically, I know that. And then of course I look at all this and I go, well, is this all just denial? Maybe, but it is what it is. I am who I am. And I'm just going to be this person. I'm an overachiever. I spend so much time connecting with women that isn't about work. I mean, it's under the umbrella of She Recovers. It's whether it's messaging or talking or Zooming. And so, like, does that count as work? It certainly counts as taking up a lot of time in my day-to-day life, but it's like, it's filling me up for the other part of the day where I'm having to send that email that takes you 3 hours to compose, you know, those ones. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, it just all kind of does balance out in an odd way.
And again, I think what you're explaining and displaying here is that everyone's path is going to look very different. The pace that you conduct your life at is just not going to work for somebody else. And that's okay. The way that you have recovered and the things that you're recovering from are going to be different from other people. But it means that we all have an opportunity to learn from one another and to engage with one another and to share the truth underlying all of it, which is just that we are all the same. We all have those same feelings, those same worries, those same concerns, and being able to connect with other people in real life and online. I mean, that's the way that we're just going to continue to break down those walls of stigma and shame.
Totally.
I love it.
Just it's showing up as who we are. I can't pretend to not be a person who really likes to get things done. I just can't.
That's it. That is such a part of who you are. It started when you were just a little girl wanting to be that person, you know, and so you've grown up to be an incredible woman who is sharing so much with all the rest of us. And we're so grateful. I have a couple of other questions for you. I want to know, other than I know you've talked about the retreats and different things. What are your favorite tools in recovery?
Reading. Always reading.
And do you always read about recovery, or is reading sometimes fiction or just getting lost? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I read about everything, but fiction is my favorite. It's my release. Like I generally have a novel on the go at all times. I don't right now.
And I love that you're able to then almost it takes you back to when you were younger, where you got to
escape. Yeah. And also movies. Like, I do like movies. I'm not a big Netflix person. Like, I'm really behind. I have a few series, but I'm like so behind on them. I kind of, I like walking. It needs to smarten up. It's been like really dreary West Coast here this last little while because I'm a fair weather walker. But I love walking, and I like resting. Like, I really do like going to bed early and having good sleeps. My other tools are, I like writing. I don't get to write as much as I think I'd like to. I wrote a piece a few days ago about losing my mom, and
it was beautiful.
I just really love kind of writing. That's definitely a tool,
and how cathartic.
It's connection. Yeah.
I find that too with writing. Sometimes, we've talked about this before. Like, I don't even know how I feel about something until I put pen to paper, and then it's like, oh, that's how how I feel about it.
Yeah.
All right.
Our grandkids that are around. We have 2 that live here close by, 2 that live far away, but just
Oh, aren't kids the best for just really keeping us in the moment? I mean, talk about not being able to be a workaholic when you have little ones around you. Like they just
Crazy.
they will not let that happen.
So fun.
Yes, so fun. All right, I have another question for you. I've got two more.
Oh my goodness.
What is the best thing about being clean and sober?
Oh, so many. The best thing. Oh, relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have really, really real relationships. And that's, even with people who were part of my crazy past, they're still in my life today, very different relationships. I mean, they're kind of fun because we can look back at who we were or who I was, and it can be fun.
Yeah.
Like, it can be dangerous. Like it's weird looking back, but it's fun. And then, to have been in my relationships with men were like really bad. In fact, most of them were very short, if you know what I mean, for years. And, to have been married to this person who just supports absolutely everything I do for 26 years and I just love him and my kids love him. And so that's that. And then just the women, and again, women who I've known in my recovery, whether they're older friends who I see less regularly, but women who have been in my sphere since I've been in recovery, deep, deep, deep connections going on 30 years with some of these women, others, 20. And then those who have been like the last 7 years since we started She Recovers, like just people like you and others who I've like fallen in love with. I mean, that is just so important to me. And maybe most of all right now, the most inspiring to me are the people who are newer to recovery, regardless of what they're recovering from, who are kind of coming into our fold in all their vulnerability and hope states, and just watching them progress, just a little inch at a time, and sometimes fall back. And then those are really the most inspiring relationships that I have right now. Are the people that are newer and hungry for this. They're hungry for this. And I just feel like, even though I don't have the answers for other people, because of course we only have our own answers, but when I can just give somebody a little bit of encouragement in a Facebook group, or hop on a call with them, because I think that that's going to make a difference, and or whatever it is, it's just, relationships. And then with my family, my sister's in recovery and she's got a hard lot right now. She's taking care of my dad in Edmonton. He's elderly and quite frail, and we almost lost him twice in the last 6 months, and she's bearing the brunt of that. But I think, she and I are closer than we have been in this last few years. Well, we are definitely closer than we were for a few years, that I can be there for my dad and my kids, and my relationships. I mean, and I get to work with my daughter, which we've been struggling a little bit with some of that stuff, like because she wants me to be her mom, and I actually think I even said to her recently, I don't have time to be your mom right now. I'm your business partner. Like, and I was kind of serious in that moment, but that's kind of a sad situation. So need to kind of look at that.
But that's okay. Like, isn't that all part of the work in progress? And what I'm loving is that you are having that conversation. I think for so many of us, we have it often. Let me just say, we had it right here in this room yesterday, where she's saying that she needs you to be her mom, and you're like, we're too busy for that.
Well, kind of like she's mad at me. She says, I'm not impressed with you as a business partner right now, and I'm not impressed with you as a mother. I'm like, oh, okay, well then what do we do about that? But what we do, we have blow-ups sometimes. It's hard to work with somebody all the time. We should do a show just on mother-daughter businesses, honestly. But we always work through it and talk through it. And I love her, and I'm so proud of her. Well, I mean, she's pretty special. Like, she flew out of my loins. I can't even believe it. It's amazing. Well, I can believe it, and she can believe it. I think that anybody that knows you and who has been in your energy, we just all get it. You really are the real deal. You really, truly are just here to serve, and you want to help others through sharing your story and helping others to open up and share theirs. Like you said, your favorite people are those newcomers, the vulnerable, shaky people that are like, what is all this? And to be able to show your up as yourself, as the testament of this is what recovery can look like. It's not perfect. It's not every day amazing. Shit happens. My daughter's mad at me. Stuff goes on still. Life isn't unicorns, farting rainbows. I mean, when we get sober, that's just not real. We feel everything now, but that's the beauty of it, is that we're really here for those relationships. I mean, that's just the crux of life, I think, is we don't live here all by ourselves on this crazy planet. No, it's amazing. It is. And I just always like to say, I mean, and Taryn is just amazing. But I have another amazing daughter too, who looks exactly like me. Taryn,
does she?
like, oh yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, it's hard because Taryn's got the amazing, shocking red, purple, burgundy, neon pink. I don't know what color it is, but it's incredible. So it's hard, right? Because we can't, you know, that's such a part of her
signature mark. Yeah.
That's so.
I'm lucky. My kids are pretty great. I'm lucky.
Yeah. Well, you're a great mom, and you're a Mama Dawn to so many of us. We
love you, girls.
I love you so much. Thank you for this time. Yeah. I'm going to borrow one last question from Oprah.
Okay.
What do you know for sure?
I am worthy.
Absolutely beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. Hugs to Roger.
Oh, thank you. He'll give them right back to you. Thank you so much. This was a dream.
Thanks, Sarah. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great.
Bye.
To get access to all of the free videos and interviews, visit sobrietystartshere.com.